This is CEC Gurukul lecture series, and the series that we are running is titled The English Novel, or the Novel in English. And we have done a number of texts now from the 18th century, from the 19th century, and today's text is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. We have with us the scholar Dr. Richa Bajaj from Delhi University, and she'll be giving this talk. And since it's a woman's novel, it has issues of a different kind in the 19th century. It was generally a male-dominated system. But then there were women who were sensitive enough to give expression to their own point of view and their own experiences. So in that series, we are today having a lecture by Dr. Bajaj about Jane Eyre. So Dr. Bajaj, please continue, begin.
Thank you, Professor Anand Prakash. Viewers, today we'll discuss Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Now, Charlotte Bronte is one of the early Victorian fiction writers, poet as well. She, along with her sisters, Anne Bronte and Emily Bronte, you've also had a series, you've also had a lecture on Emily Bronte. She, along with her sisters, set out to write some romantic tales. These were sisters who lived in the Yorkshire district of England, and so were very close to the moors and very cut from or away from the glamorous life of the city. But interestingly, all the sisters were deeply influenced by the natural circumstances around them, or nature around them, the wilderness or the wildness of nature, so to speak. Both sustained them and made them very passionate, intense women. So, of course, this is to say about their habitat, perhaps to some extent where they lived, that created a kind of sensibility in them. But at the same time, it is not just the natural surroundings that changed the way they thought and believed and talked. It is also that things were changing in the 19th century. 19th century saw the coming up of a kind of a early or pre-feminist kind of a movement, in the sense that women became aware of themselves and began to look at themselves independently and freely and sought liberty in life. So this kind of a change you saw in the writings of Mary Wollstonecraft, who in a way outlined what could be called the rights of women. Again, because there was a new kind of awareness in the 19th century, particularly 19th century thought, because you see, I feel that it has also to do with the kind of new scientific theories that were coming up. For instance, you have a new theory come up, which tells you that we are no more created, right? That we evolved, and what is more, probably we evolved from an amoeba. So if we evolved, then we evolved because of natural selection. We evolved because of the perseverance, and because we survived, because we fought and we adapted, we changed ourselves. So this idea that that natural selection happened, and that we grew and we evolved and we fought with our surroundings to survive, and the survival instinct ensured the evolution of human species, in a way also underlined one very important fact, that women, unlike Eve, are not dependent on the man or Adam in any way, that they evolved as much as the other sex did, and that they were not, they're not just a byproduct, or not just a supplement, or not just created to please the male fraternity. So this new realization, this new kind of theory of evolution, I think worked very well for women, where they realized that they had equal right on their lives, they had equal right to things and to social mobility, to bettering themselves, to evolving themselves, and that nobody could take that away from them. This kind of realization among women is what led to also women practicing writing fiction, and at the same time women readership growing in a big way in the 19th century. Now, when we turn to Charlotte Bronte, we realize that here is a woman who's trying to strike a balance, so to speak, between that passionate, intense woman that she is and the customary, superficial woman that society would want her to be. In the case of Jane Austen, for instance, who still carries the essence and values of the 18th century, Jane Austen was able to find a compromise and fit in the 18th century world. Her women, her elegant ladies, or even if they were conscious women, they did not, there was little psychological intensity in characters and more to do with how to fit best with and without compromising on one's dignity, how to fit best in the circumstances that one faced. And this is where I think there is a remarkable difference between Jane Austen's kind of novels and the novels that you see of the Bronte sisters, both Emily Bronte and Charlotte Bronte. Wherein Charlotte Bronte, in fact, underlines that she does not want to write like Jane Austen. In fact, when her novels come up, critics tell her, advise her, that she should learn from Jane Austen and write her kind of novels. And her response in one of the letters is, why would you want me to be like those elegant ladies surrounded by beautiful gardens and still adhering to the patriarchal normative society? Of course, she doesn't use the word patriarchal, but in as many words emphasizes that. Her kind of a woman is one who has immense inner power and strength, and is able to hold her fort, is able to fight her battles in life owing to this kind of sustenance that she receives from her inner soul and her inner self. This kind of strengthened steel-like soul that Jane Eyre is in the novel is what Charlotte Bronte would have women writers inculcate, or women characters inculcate. So I think that is a very significant difference between the 18th century kind of a novel and the 19th century novel, and particularly when looked at from a woman's point of view. Would you like to comment on this?
Well, yes, definitely, because you have given a new insight that there is a difference between the way women write in the early 19th century and the way they write in the middle of the 19th century. And the difference you have related to the social developments, to the writing by more and more women and discussing themselves and not bothering much about the surroundings which are male dominated. So this idea, that there is a change from 1812, for instance, to 1847, when these writers write, much water has flown down the Thames. And this is to be noted, and women are now getting forward, in spite of the fact that all the three sisters write still under the assumed male name, the pseudonym. So things continue, and they are at the same time changing. I agree.
Yes. I agree that they still feel compelled. So it's not like a revolution of sorts has taken place, but that women are fighting for their space, and of course that kind of a bias against them remains, where you find that Charlotte Bronte and Emily Bronte and Anne Bronte, all of them had to resort to male pseudonyms to be able to make an impression, or at least so they believed that they would be there'd be a prejudice against them, and therefore they felt that if people knew that it was a woman writer, then they would be dismissive about this work and they would like to be read, and so they used what could be called a more gender neutral or male pseudonym, so that people don't unnecessarily criticize them for the works that they write.
And the point you make leads me to think that the three sisters and other writers also would have shed witticism that Jane Austen is a master of. They are not witty at all. They mean what they say. They don't go into the double meaning. They don't go into playfulness. They don't go into the kind of bravado that Jane Austen might be representing in her novels, and they are poetic in their expression.
I think it has a lot to do with the age also. Finally, if you think of it, it is the romantic age in poetry, but then in Dickens, for instance, also is doesn't become wicked or doesn't take so much recourse to witticism. He's also a writer of pure feelings, if one could use that word, and so I think the age has the age is caught up in this larger debate of conveying ideas or giving strength to ideas on the basis of feeling and emotion, and not through parody or satire or witticism or humor. For them, ideas are best understood when placed within the framework of feeling, or vice versa. That without feeling and emotion attached to an idea, the idea doesn't reach its fulfillment, or doesn't in fact relate to the reader. For instance, it doesn't connect with the reader, which is why you find that 19th century fiction is become more like pillow talk, if I could use that word. Like you build a relationship with a novel, particularly of the sort that we are discussing, like the Bronte sisters or Dickens, in that sense, where there is a kind of an intimacy that one develops with the characters in the novel. And when you develop that intimacy, you enter their world, you enter their emotion, you enter their psychological states, and as they grow, and in this venture, you feel cathartic as well, and at the same time you return. So there's a kind of a deep connect that these novels try to build with the reader.
What about the dark atmosphere in the novels of the three Bronte sisters?
I think it is to do with, one, when I look at their kind of upbringing, that they all have such strong influence of the natural wild world, that dark mysteries of the forests, right, the dark unknown areas, both work as potentials in the novel, but at the same time as mysteries, those that remain unexplored and unknown. And what is interesting is that they don't, even as I think, at least in the case of both Charlotte Bronte and Emily Bronte, I think that they do try to bring in some kind of a mystic element to it, because they delve so much on the spiritual, right? There is in Jane Eyre, when Jane speaks to Rochester and he proposes her, before he proposes her, and he's teasing her, telling her that perhaps he'd marry this other woman that she thinks that he'd marry, Miss Ingram, and she's of course restless and all flustered, and in that moment she says, "It's not me speaking to you, it is my spirit that speaks to you. It is my soul speaking to your soul." So in that sense, the spiritual angle and the soul angle is, I think this is also the deeper connect, or the kind of relationship that both Emily Bronte and Charlotte Bronte build, in the sense that their relationships, the man-woman relationship, they are based more on the idea of this spiritual oneness, intellectual spiritual oneness, or in fact not intellectual so much, because they don't try to rationalize it also. There is no rational behind why one should fall in love, or the category of love, but there is this thing that there is a kind of a connect which is understood to be a more deeper connect than just at the level of hierarchies in society, so social norms, or for that matter even logic or rational element. There is a sense, once Jane Eyre, and Jane Eyre again is a novel that builds a kind of a very intimate relationship with the reader, because there the narrator talks directly to the reader again and says, "Reader, I did this. Reader, I told you that I had fallen in love with, or I loved Rochester, and now it is impossible for me to unlove him." So this kind of a confessional mode that this novel often takes, and in some cases the narrator goes on to say, "Pardon me if if it appears to be a paradox what I say, but then this is how I feel." So the ultimate rationale that is found, or the ultimate rationale that is found in the novel, is that that's how I feel, right? And again, and the inability, the novel is also very poetic in many ways, because often the narrator would tell you that I didn't feel any kind of jealousy. For instance, in this particular case that we are discussing, Jane says that I didn't feel jealousy for Miss Ingram, who is this elegant lady who wouldn't touch me with a pair of tongs, who would stay away from me. She thinks herself to be so upper class. I didn't feel jealousy for her, because because the word jealousy cannot convey what I feel, right? So again, the impossibility of being able to convey in words the feeling or the emotion, to convey its intensity. So I think the novel as such is about a woman's inability, and at the same time strive to express, her intense emotion.
There are 2 points you have made. The second point I'll take later. But the first point is about their engagement with nature and mystery and all those things. And you have very rightly, pointed out in the beginning itself that this is the age of romanticism. They have grown up at that time, and they have taken influences from the romantic poets. So far as the second thing is
I'd like to add here, if I can,
Yes.
that not just that they have taken influence from the romantic poets, they've actually drew sustenance and influence from the French Revolution. Let's not take that. So, and French Revolution, in fact, gave women the kind of was a kind of an eye-opener for women, where they felt that they could, what happened in France, they could bring it in England, and that the ideals of liberty and fraternity that were sought in France should also come in place in England. And so the French Revolution is give a fillip to women's movements, or women's created an awareness, at least among women, of their own rights and feelings.
That's a new and interesting point.
Yes.
That French Revolution, when it is over, and France loses that kind of battle with England finally, then these people come into being, and then they start taking influences from there. And
Right.
the French Revolution has become an inspiring thing even for the English women.
Right. So I think the French Revolution, for what happened in terms of events, may not be important for them, but as an idea
Yes.
and as a desirable goal, is something that they all look up to. Whether we talk about, say, the poets, P.B. Shelley and others, whether we talk of the poets or fiction writers, they're all influenced to some degree by that idea itself of liberty. You see, time and again in the novel, Jane says, when she is in Lowood, I'll of course be discussing her evolution and Bildungsroman also, but then when she's in Lowood and preparing, and she's trained herself to become a governess, she prays and she says, "Oh, please God, give me liberty. I need liberty. If not liberty, then give me some change. Give me change from my present condition." So time and again she refers to liberty, and refers to herself as not any lesser mortal, she constantly brings that point out that I'm not a machine, I am a woman, I'm a human being, and that I don't feel any less than anyone else who may have belonged to another class. So I think there is this feeling, this urge, this desire to liberate oneself.
This is the second point you made. That point was regarding adding to the scope of fiction at that time. So they are taking chances. They are getting encouragement from ideas, and they are making their own fiction, and they are bringing in aspects which are not there in fiction earlier. So this personal voice, they're talking to the reader. It is of course there in the 18th century, but the way they talk, that's much more intimate in terms.
Right, that's why I said it's more like a pillow talk, or more
Yes.
like an intimate, deep bond, connect.
And they are able to externalize their inner world with some kind of confidence in the mid-19th century. So that is an insight I think worth considering still further later.
Right,
by
that's
the
true.
scholars.
And yes, you see, and the point of liberation that I was talking about, or the idea of liberating oneself, in fact finds physical manifestation in the novel, when time and again you find that Jane wants to escape. So her, that she's confined each time she enters a space, and we look at these attributes, that every time whatever space she occupies, whatever position she has, in terms of the social position she occupies and the physical space that she occupies, whether it is in Gateshead when she's a young girl, or later Thornfield, or for that matter Marsh End, where she stays, in all these spaces, in all these locales, in these conditions, she finds herself confined and restrained, and she looks for some kind of an escape. For instance, and I'll be talking about the Red Room incident as well, but just to give an overview of just this idea of escape, the point is that wherever she is, she wants to leave that place, and there is the more constraining the circumstances become, the more pressure is built on her to submit to authority, the more she feels the urge to rebel against it and to run away from it. And she literally runs away from Thornfield when she finds out that Rochester has another wife, and that her marriage is called off. So it is at that point she actually just runs away, and she runs away without any set of clothes or anything with her, and she runs into the wilderness. It is a moment, in fact that is one moment where I think she comes very close to her sister Emily Bronte, because there it is Jane only with nature. You know, she's fighting the very essentials of life. You know, food. She has pangs of hunger, and she doesn't know how to quench it. And she's, you know, she feels the pain, and she's you know, she cries herself out. And it's raining, and she's walking, and her shoes are torn, and she doesn't have any place. To an extent, when she's found unconscious by a family, then they realize that this woman is almost at her deathbed, because she has faced along these things. So how nature also in a way penalizes her, or nature also adds to her problems, is something that is a part of her escape. That escape is not something which is beautiful in this case. Escape requires or has in store suffering. So I think at a lot of these junctures, there is this intense feeling in her to escape her circumstances, and in each case, whether it is, and we'll discuss this perhaps, but in each case there is a very overpowering, dominating male figure who she's running away from.
I think you have made this point and taken it forward also in terms of the assertion of the female in the middle of the 19th century, and that way, you know, the woman is trying to find a voice of her own. She'll look at the world from her point of view. She'll criticize. She will have the confidence. She will have the, you know, inspiration also to somehow become alert about what is happening around her, and that way, you know, more of womanhood is seen in the novels of the Three Sisters, which was not the case earlier. People talked about their surrounding or their family, etc. But here the women are talking about themselves.
And interestingly, if I could just add to close this point, you see, women are not seen in their domestic spheres necessarily as cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the household chores, or sewing and stitching and learning the arts of, or becoming beautiful. Much of 18th century literature revolved around beautiful women. For once, you have a woman who, and the idea of the plain Jane actually comes from there, isn't it? So I think that these are they are redefining womanhood as well, and the woman's role in society.
So friends, what we have learned from Dr. Bajaj is that women writers in the middle of the 19th century have taken a step away from the traditional way of writing, and that they are in a phase of exploring themselves, exploring their ideas, seeing the world from their angle, and that's how they are asserting themselves. So thanks for this, and thank you,
Thank you,
viewers.